Coming up, we start to turn our attention to the Carolina Panthers and the Week 2 matchup that has Giants fans thinking, hoping, dreaming 2-0 is on the table. My goodness, friends, we take a look back at Sunday's matchup, highlight some players that had some success, some areas potentially of concern or success going into Carolina, and yes, how to watch Daniel Jones. Yes, friends. It's OGP, the One Giant Podcast, where, of course, we are your hosts over here. Adam Armbrecht breaking down the Brooklyn Nets on the Locked On Nets podcast. And yonder there, the not all too healthy, but still wealthy and wise season generational ticket holder, Mr. Andrew Makowitz.
Adam, still a little under the weather. I appreciate you taking the lion's share of everything, including the criticism and the beating from the listeners. Like, you really took all of it yesterday, so I really appreciate that.
Not just the volume of the reps vocally, but also just the slings and arrows from the fan base. I get it. And listen, I didn't anticipate coming into this season and having conversations around Daniel Jones and how he looks and not having, by the way, coming out of a Week 1 victory, not having visceral reactions from fans who believe that Daniel Jones can be the guy and can be successful for this team. We're going to talk about a lot of different things. I was being tongue-in-cheek at the top there, but I really do think that there is this. I'm always going to try to do it. I'm going to try to say this is coming back to neutral and just trying to take all the information in. I'm not against Daniel Jones being successful, and I'm not against him continuing to show growth underneath Brian Daboll in this system. We want to highlight some other players, as we said, that were good on Sunday, and then take a look at Carolina. We're going to start to do that today. We'll do it tomorrow. And then, as you know, Andrew Makowitz, bet of the week, will be coming up on Friday. So you're going to want to be around for that.
Want to know, baby. Want to know.
Yeah, the only place you're not undefeated is in game predictions. That's the weird part, where I actually
that up a little
am
bit.
Undefeated. So we'll see how that goes. That's later in the week, though. Before we get into, so I want to just briefly talk about Daniel Jones again in some very positive ways. You had some additional stats out of Sunday that really showcased the areas in which he was successful. And we even got some more comments in there among them. And I'm not knocking anybody saying, hey, he was pressured on 53% of the dropbacks in that game. I have some stats around that as well. It doesn't dismiss the fact that we know it was an inconsistent performance from the offensive line, but you still look for ways to quantify what Daniel Jones did well, what this offense did well, and how you can duplicate it going forward.
Yeah, so one of the stats that we saw was NFL and CBS put out a stat that said lowest percentage of off-target throws in Week 1. And Josh Allen was tied for first with 0% of his throws. And he was tied with Daniel Jones at 0%. And Kirk Cousins was at 3%. Kyler Murray was at 5.9%. Now, I think we could take this a little bit with a grain of salt, considering Daniel Jones did throw an interception. So it's like, how could the throw?
That's a really good point. I wasn't even thinking.
How could you have 0 if it gets picked? Then basically what they're saying is that it wasn't Daniel Jones's fault and that the route was wrong or that it should have been catchable. But I mean, that's why you take all these stats with a grain of salt. But at the same time, even if that one throw was off, he's still in the top 5 in terms of when he had time to be able to throw the ball down the field. He was very accurate. And the numbers back it up, 80% completion percentage overall.
Yeah, listen, 100%. And like you say, when you see these things, you go, yeah, but what about that one throw? And that's fine, because even on Next Gen Stats, when you look inside of it a little bit, they do a great job around expected completion percentage. So, for Daniel Jones, or you can go through any of these, his now, this is creating this total picture. I think that he was asked to do some for the most part, simple things. And that's not a negative. Keep it simple and do it successfully. And why I say that is Daniel Jones had an expected completion percentage of 71.1, and he completed 80% of those. So his plus minus on that, 9.9, put him fourth behind Josh Allen, Jameis Winston, and Geno Smith for the Seattle Seahawks. And, it feels like it ties back into that in that sense of, hey, we're not asking you to go out there, 21 pass attempts. We didn't ask you to go out there and carry the load. I think sometimes when we compare those completion percentages and off-target percentage, hey, how much risk are you taking, right, for some of those rewards? Patrick Mahomes had the best day in the NFL, right, this past week. And he's not in that category because he's going to take some more risks there to have some of those bigger opportunities. But again, like there's no knocking. And I find it fascinating that expected completion percentage, when you look at it for Josh Allen coming from Buffalo and understanding that comparison that we want to make, his expected completion percentage was also a high number at 71.6, and he completed nearly 84% of his passes. So there is a blueprint here as well, right? What are we trying to do? We're trying to put Daniel Jones in successful situations, mitigate the risk, and then if he does that well, you're going to see, at a minimum, opportunities for the Giants to win football games.
Yeah, I mean, Adam, the simple answer was, people say this is year 4 for Daniel Jones. It's also his third offensive coordinator, and this is his
Yeah,
first game in the new scheme. So, like, when you think
right.
about whether if you weren't giving a letter grade to Daniel Jones in week 1 and it was just a simple test of pass
Pass fail.
fail,
They
you would
passed.
say he passed the test, right?
Yeah.
Like he,
Yep.
he didn't he didn't fail the test. He put the team in position to win, completed the pass that they asked him to make, and
Boy,
he did it, right? So
But
like
in some ways, I could have saved myself a lot of trouble yesterday if I just said, I think he passed the test week 1 and left it at that, right? Because I agree with you. Like he didn't fail week 1. After being elated by the win, you go and you start to break it down more, and there's areas that I think he needs to improve and needs to continue to work. But to your point, he passed. He did enough of what he was asked to do to be successful.
Right. And now we understand what we have as an offensive line. We know what the weapons are going to look like on the outside. We see that Saquon Barkley is fresh. You would expect that every game, you expect this to look better. You expect them to
Yes.
open up the
Yes.
playbook a little bit more. You expect them to, I would like to see the Daniel Jones pass numbers rise to 25, where they give him more ownership of the team. It doesn't have to be game 1 under Daboll that he's throwing 48 passes. Like that doesn't have to be the way that we win. But you do, if you expect him to be a franchise quarterback, want him to just not be along for the ride and actually lead this team moving forward. But as we said, game 1, Giants take the W. Can't be upset about it. And if he shows a little bit more next game against Carolina, we've really got some positive momentum going at him.
That's it. And by the way, if you're someone who believes in Daniel Jones, you just said it. Like I want to see him throw 25 passes a game, and I want to see him at some point maybe throw 30, because this year, as you've always spoken about, Andy, for you, this is confirm or deny Daniel Jones, and you think that he can be successful. But I think you would agree, if we're 7 weeks into the season and Daniel Jones is averaging 20 pass attempts per game, you're going to have a hard time fully committing to, hey, this is a franchise guy. Not that you can't win with him, but you're intentionally preventing him from the risk.
Well, there's very few quarterbacks that are worth $45 million a year if you're only going to let them throw the ball 20 times, right? Like you may as well just go get some other guy off. Like you just said, Geno Smith's making $5 million a year. If you're only going to let it loose for that amount of time, your money can be spent elsewhere. But I do agree. It's game 1. Let's see if this is the game plan all the time moving forward. I liked what I saw. If it was not a pass fail and it was a grading system, I would have given him a higher grade than you would have. But I think we both agree he passed the test. Now it's on to Carolina, where the Giants have a legitimate opportunity to build upon all the goodwill that they just built up in week 1.
100%. And the last two things I just want to touch on here, one very positive one. You can also go over and see it is air yards that the ball travels before being caught. And that's a difference too, right? You throw a pass 2 yards behind the line of scrimmage. Saquon Barkley takes it for 60 yards. You go, yay, I did it. 60 yards, big completion for me. But Daniel Jones actually did rank 3rd in the league behind, once again, Jameis Winston and Josh Allen. 3rd overall, 5.2 yards before the ball was caught. Now you have the big play to Sterling Shepard. That obviously factors in. Nevertheless, you don't take that off the board. So another good stat for him. And the last thing I'll just mention here on him before we talk really glowingly and talk about Carolina here, some other players for the Giants, was the other big stat that just told me as well, when someone mentioned at the top, 53% pressured on 53% of dropbacks. The one thing I'll note here is time to throw for Daniel Jones. He had what was the 6th most time, 2.98 seconds to throw from the snap, behind Justin Fields, Carson Wentz, Justin Herbert, Russell Wilson, and Lamar Jackson. And I think what's really interesting about that portion of the list too is, like, think about Justin Fields, who was playing in a slop fest there against the 49ers. Think about Carson Wentz, who gave you every variation of his entire career in 60 minutes of football. Justin Herbert, right? Like, you see the swath. And I think, again, for the Giants right now as a team, as we talk about the team overall, we need down to down consistency, not violent pendulums, right? Because that number tells you Well, when it's good for Daniel Jones to have time to throw the ball, it's good. And then there's these other times where we think it looks really bad. But I think perceptually, Giants fans, and we do it too, you hone in on the negative, especially when it comes to that offensive line because of how bad it's been. And you don't realize that, hey, man, they were doing some good things more often than not. You had to be if you're down, getting shut out at halftime and you managed to come back.
Well, so you mentioned those names in terms of time to throw. All of those names won except for Russell Wilson, and they didn't lose that game because of Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson threw for 340 and
Right.
looked good. And it's like, wow, look, if the quarterback has a little bit of time to throw, you have a 90% chance basically of winning the game, which is like what it kind of extrapolates to.
Mhm.
Yes, if Daniel Jones has time to make throws, you saw the ball to Sterling Shepard. He can make those throws, which is why I feel a certain way about Daniel Jones. It's like, man, if we could fix this offensive line, we got something cooking. Adam, if he gets time and Saquon Barkley looks the way that he looks, this team overall just has a dynamically different approach to how they tackle these matchups moving forward.
Oh, 100%, man. We know they have the Carolina Panthers. They came off of playing the Cleveland Browns. They did not look good in a myriad of areas. You go and you look at the stats even for Baker Mayfield. We talk about you can't take one off the board, but there's one big throw there to Robbie Anderson. And outside of that, it would have been an abysmal game for them. And then really on both sides of the ball, too. They didn't have a good rushing attack with Christian McCaffrey. And then you go into and you see what happened to them defensively. So it feels like there's a lot of opportunities there. And I think we can tie this into a commentary around one Saquon Barkley from, I don't know, what do they call them? I think talking heads. I guess we maybe consider that as well, but this is a bad talking head. We're good talking heads. This is bad talking head. Skip Bayless. I will tee this up with this information, which I just find interesting. No one's going to watch that game and see an eye test of Saquon Barkley and think it was anything other than phenomenal. I find it fascinating. Stats are interesting. Saquon Barkley had one of the worst efficiency ratings. 2.31 was his efficiency rating. And it's like, how do I synthesize that information when I watch the game on Sunday and Saquon Barkley just looks like a stud from his rookie year, something that apparently Skip Bayless cannot wrap his head around.
You know what it is? It's like if some stat person comes out and says Josh Allen spiral was not as
Well, that's a good
revolving
one. Yeah,
as Justin
spiral rate.
Herbert,
Yeah.
the spiral spin rate was
That's a good
not
one.
as high, making it a tougher ball for the wide receivers to catch. So shout out to Stephon Diggs. He's really the MVP. It's like, can we just use our brains for half a second?
Yeah.
Like you just said all the other stats of like his accuracy, everything else. It's like, oh yeah, Saquon wasn't efficient. Did you see him break it up the field and run for 55 yards? Did you see him on that 2-point conversion? Absolutely,
Literally make the entire
out two guys. He
like,
made the play. Like, how much more efficient can you be when two guys are unguarded, staring at you with the game on the line? So, yeah, listen, we say all these stats because they're all different indicators, and if you put enough of them out there, you can kind of see the progression of what's going on. It's why overall we talk about Daniel Jones being well. It's silly when you get one stat that says Saquon Barkley wasn't efficient in something. You're like, I don't know, because he ran for the most yards of anyone, had almost 200 all-purpose yards, and was everything to that offense. Yeah. And guess what? If that's how inefficient he's going to be, Adam, every single game, I think I'll take that.
I think I'll take the most inefficient running back in the league. Yeah. But to your point, we were talking pre-show. Skip Bayless came out in speaking about his performance coming out of there, out of that week 1 game. Do you have that quote up in front of you about his take on Saquon Barkley, which I have which we'll go ahead and give it, and then I have my thoughts on it.
It's absurd, but like, obviously this is a talking head that really is a huge Dallas fan that doesn't really like the Giants very much. So clearly he's going to feel a certain way. But he said, I don't love him as a running back because in the end, if I can be painfully objective and honest about this, which is the best part of the
Very
quote,
important.
right?
Always give those caveats when you're about to not be objective or honest.
Trust me on this is always a thing you say when you need someone to trust you. He's more of a cherry on top kind of back. He's more whipped cream than he is cake. He's more of a luxury back. This is also coming from the guy on Monday morning that said with Dak Prescott hurt that Cooper Rush was just as good as Dak Prescott at most things in football. So
and where did he have Dak Prescott as a quarterback? Just so we have a comp to where.
He said that he was easily top 10 in the league as a quarterback, and he did those stats comparing completion percentages in crunch time in the fourth quarter with 6 yards or more to go, and he was better than Justin Herbert. Like those are the types of things that Skip does to get people ramped up. What I think is hilarious about this is he's saying this about Saquon Barkley, who's having an absolute resurgence now a renaissance. He's back on the idea of like really wanting to give some payback to people. And his star running back, who he's loved, Ezekiel Elliott, is falling off a cliff. Like
Oh
his
yeah.
star running back, he would still right now take Ezekiel Elliott over Saquon Barkley because he likes the guy that can run into the offensive line and fall forward for 2.5 or 3 yards, as opposed to a guy that can hit you a home run on the outside. So take it with a grain of salt, Adam. But isn't it kind of funny that these are the types of things that are coming out after Saquon has arguably, player of the week type of play for the Giants?
Oh yeah, I mean, listen, again, Saquon Barkley. We've talked about him before about, hey, what's the style of his game and how can he be more effective? But I don't know how, after all the injuries, getting himself healthy and coming into this season, and then having that performance in which, again, he was on the outside a lot, gave him that space to work with. He also ran himself between the tackles and got those handful of like tough yards for the Giants. And even, it's funny, even on some of those tough yards, when he comes off the left tackle and kind of, we talked about, does like that little swim move in between some of the defenders to get more yardage. It's like, hey, guess what? Sometimes it looks pretty when you're making the tough yards as well. Is Saquon Barkley a far more graceful running back than he is a bruiser? Of course he is. But it doesn't change the fact that he's effective. He's efficient as all hell. Save that explicit tag right there. But you know what I mean? Like, he did everything you want him to do. You could have this conversation over the last couple of years when he was hurt, but to come out of week one and not just say like, hey man, if this is what Saquon is again, which is what he was in his rookie year, he's one of the best running backs in the league, bar none. There's no explanation. There's no excuse. There's no clarification. There's no compartmentalizing what he is or is not. He's one of the best running backs in the league. That's period. End of discussion.
He finished it by saying, in the end, he can't be a Derrick Henry or a Jonathan Taylor or quote unquote Ezekiel Elliott in his prime because he's not a bell cow type. And it's like
Saquon Barkley is already proven, by the way. Like, I mean, Ezekiel Elliott in his prime was a phenomenal back, and I mean, I can say it could still be if we think he could find it again. I don't want. I'm not here. We're not here to bash, what looks like maybe the back end of Ezekiel Elliott's career or effectiveness. But again, I said this back then. I remember saying it back then when Saquon Barkley came out. It was like, hey, Ezekiel Elliott is doing it right now, and comparing those two backs. And then I said, yeah, I still want the guy that can hit the home run. Like that's what the NFL is predicated on now. Derrick Henry is a unicorn for what he is and what he's been able to do and how consistent he's been able to do that. There's not a lot of running backs that can thump between the tackles, come out the other side of the turbine, and then run for another 50 yards. He's built a very specific way, having those longer legs and that strength. Like, he's enormous. It's like Brendan Jacobs if he was 30 pounds lighter, but still built out of pure steel. Like that. Yes, there are unique versions of players. And guess what? Saquon Barkley, if he can stay healthy, is a unique version of this type of running back, something that maybe Christian McCaffrey is that like different mold of it where it's far more dynamic. I'd say pass catching maybe than running, but like there's different versions. There's different flavors of ice cream, friends. Guess what? They're all delicious.
Adam, it's all about explosive plays. That's what they talk about in the NFL now. It is great to have a guy that can grind it out and get you 4 yards when you need it. But guess what? Ezekiel Elliott and the Cowboys haven't done much in the playoffs. Derrick Henry and the Titans haven't done much in the playoffs. Jonathan Taylor and the Colts haven't done much in the playoffs. Guess who's there? Joe Burrow, Tom Brady, Matt Stafford.
And how about Joe Mixon, right? But like, how about tip of the cap to Joe Mixon, who's been there for them? Like, it's like there's running backs that have success. And yeah, I know what you mean, though.
But I'm saying, like, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Darrell Henderson, there's all these different running backs that make the Super Bowl every year. But one thing that's important is you see the Mahomes and the Burrows and the Bradys and the Staffords who make explosive plays happen for their team. And that's why at the end of all that, it comes down to, can you manufacture points in a whole wide variety of ways? Yeah. And Saquon Barkley shows that he can do that between the tackles and outside.
You know what I think the worst disservice that Skip Bayless did to his own argument would be to say one thing that Ezekiel Elliott does really well, and they talk about this with the Cowboys and Tony Pollard. He's a really good pass protector. He does a great job protecting the quarterback, and that matters. Like, you can talk about that if you want in terms of the value you bring to an offense. When you start to get into the weeds here, again, he's 194 all-purpose yards. Like, what are we talking about? Jesus, pump up your Air Jordans there. All right. On the other side of things, though, so we're taking on the Carolina Panthers. The initial depth chart came out here. There's nothing really surprising. Everybody that you would think would be listed in a top spot still is. A lot of them have asterisks. We'll hear more about Kayvon Thibodeau later today, Azeez Ojulari later today, and in terms of their timeline, Wan'Dale Robinson is still listed at the top of the depth chart, but we know with the knee, didn't seem like it was as serious as it could have been, and yet wait and see there. I thought, to me, because I want to sing his praises a little bit. This isn't surprising. However, Josh Ezeudu was the running back in on that final scoring drive for the New York Football Giants, and much like a lot of the other guys on the offense, he had his struggles in pass protection, but he was one of the pulling guards on a number of plays for Saquon Barkley. Like, he showed to be very effective in that area of the game. Would you prefer, coming off of this Week 1 win, has anything changed for you for expectations about who you want to see out there versus who helps you maybe win ball games in the short term? Because we talked about that so much in the offseason, and now it's like, boom, surprising win over the Tennessee Titans, Carolina Panthers on tap, and we could be 2-0. Do you pull the reins back in on a guy like Josh Ezeudu, saying, hey, grip it and rip it, buddy. Like, you're out there, you're the starter, let's develop you. You had already been on, just to be clear, the side of not having him start immediately anyway, regardless of wins or losses.
Yeah, so I'm still kind of leaning towards that. Like, it's a surprising win against the Titans Week 1. The Giants have a very interesting schedule coming up where they could rally off a couple of games and get some wins, and you could rotationally bring in Josh Ezeudu and give him some reps and get him so that, he does get the experience he needs. I think
See, that part I hate, though. Yeah,
I know, but
you know,
but it's like, if the Giants are 0-4, 0-5, and the season's in the tank, and you're going to trade all your players away, yes, you put him out there just to get him a real-time experience. If you're saying that, Ben Bredesen or previously Shane Lemieux or whomever is giving the Giants just a slightly better chance to win right now, if you can do that while you incorporate Ezeudu in a handful of snaps, I think that's the way to go. So I usually like getting guys on the field. I know you definitely like it more than I do. Just let the young kids play. But I don't know. To be honest with you, I would just look over at Andrew Thomas and say, who do you want to play next to you? Because you pretty much call the shots now, considering, you've been playing well. Who do you have the best rapport with? Who do you feel like you don't have to make up for any of the things that they do?
Yeah, no, that's a perfect way, I think, to frame it. Because what I was going to say was, my pushback would be, well, Ezeudu was in there in the game that you won. Like, he played in the game that you won. So whatever these other players bring to the table, Ezeudu has at least shown he can be in there on game-winning drives. So what more do you need to see in terms of being willing to lean into it? And it's not about, is Ben Bredesen maybe a better option right now, or when is Shane Lemieux going to come? By the way, when Shane Lemieux gets healthy down the road here in a few weeks, if he looks like he's ready to go, I think everyone agreed he was the best option coming out of camp. I can understand Ezeudu taking a backseat to him. Maybe that's the caveat. It's like, in the absence of who you wanted to be your starter, I go with Ezeudu, but I think you made the best statement. Andrew Thomas, who do you want next to you? And if it's Ben Bredesen, that's it, right? Because Andrew Thomas is, as we know, now cementing himself as one of the top left tackles in the game. Whatever feels comfortable to you, that's what we want to have happen here. Hopefully he chooses Ezeudu. I guess that'd be my personal preference.
Yeah,
because I don't like the rep thing. I don't like that rep sharing thing in games. I think that's always a mistake. If you're looking to win games, you think Bredesen gives you the best effort, then hey, Ezeudu, you're the backup, and if someone gets injured, it'll be your opportunity. You develop yourself during the week. But I don't like that. It's too much. I got trauma from Joe Judge and the old, we run 9 offensive linemen per game.
Well, turning over to the defensive side of the ball, I
Yeah,
think,
please do.
a couple things that we didn't mention in just some of the aftermath is, one, Adoree Jackson without James Bradbury looks to be the part. He did everything that he was supposed to do as a number 1 cornerback in Wink Martindale's system. And, shout out to Wink Martindale. He didn't have his top 2 edge rushers. He had to release his other starting cornerback. And the Giants gave up 20 points to the AFC number 1 seed last year. Like, they did about as much as you could ask them to do in Week 1, being down so many players. But it made me think Adoree Jackson allows you to kind of forget about one side of the field. He's got it covered, and you can do some exotic and different things. You could really see that the Giants pass rush suffered without having Ojulari and Thibodeau there. Tomlin Fox is the only one that ended up coming up with 1 sack for the Giants. That's why it's really important to see either Thibodeau or Ojulari get some reps in this week to have a shot at playing on Sunday.
Yeah, I think so. In that vein of compliments to Wink Martindale and the defense, I thought Ocean Ximenez, that's another guy that had a really strong game for them on that side of the ball. When you talk about Adoree Jackson playing well, just looking over the snap count percentages as we like to do throughout the year sometimes. I mean, listen, Adoree Jackson played 100% of the snaps. Aaron Robinson played all but 3 snaps on Sunday, and for whatever it's worth. You weren't calling his name a ton, right? We wondered about Aaron Robinson coming out of the preseason, didn't look so good. We know we have that one deep play where they don't necessarily throw the flag, but he held his own. I'll be fascinated because in the upcoming matchup here, I think we're looking at more dynamic receiving weapons, including a Christian McCaffrey out of the backfield, right? More dynamic potential playmakers for Carolina. However good or bad they looked, you're still going to have more things to cover here. It was a good first step forward. And I wonder if Wink Martindale, if we're confident in him, that he can just say, hey, yeah, every week I'm going to find a new wrinkle and a new way to be successful here and to manufacture pressure. To your point, you're missing your 2 top edge rushers, your 2 top players that are going to get after the quarterback with consistency. And you found a way to navigate that game, only giving up 20 points.
Yeah, and if you think about Carolina themselves against the Cleveland Browns have a great pass rusher with Myles Garrett.
Yeah.
Carolina gave up 4 sacks. Baker Mayfield also threw a very bad pick. So like there is going to be an opportunity for Wink's defense to probably look a little bit more Wink-esque, if I can say
Mm-hmm.
that, where like it kind of looked like they were just saying, we're going to all out stop Derrick Henry. We're not going to let him get 7 or 8 yards a clip and just demoralize us. We're going to just put Adoree Jackson out on an island against whomever, whether it's Robert Woods, Traylon Burks, like doesn't matter. And we're going to say we're going to sell out to stop the run. And it's Ryan Tannehill going to beat us with his second and third wide receivers. And that just didn't seem to be the case all game.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit too, because on the defensive side of the ball, we know that, and we want to make sure we get this right. So am I saying this now correctly in Jihad Ward? That's the way we're supposed to be pronouncing him?
Jihad.
Oh, Jihad. So we were saying it right, though. Or was I saying we were saying Jihad and it's Jihad?
Yes.
Got it. Thank you. We saw a correction for somebody else over online. We want to make sure we're doing it right. Jihad Ward, who played 87%, almost 88% of the snaps defensively. Like, how is that going to evolve now in week 2? Because Derrick Henry is a different type of running back than Christian McCaffrey. Only picked up 33 yards. Offensive line doesn't look so good. But you also had Justin Ellis, he gave you 28% of the snaps. Nick Williams gave you 50% of the snaps to go with Dexter Lawrence and Leonard Williams. Dexter Lawrence, 68% of the snaps, so he still got rotated in there. Williams was kind of the big boy there with Ward at 81% of the snaps. But where is that going to shift now, right? Timon Fox, he had 41% of the reps, so like you expect that to go up a little bit more. I'll be interested. Something that we didn't see any of, 2 players that played 86% of the special team snaps, Cam Brown, Carter Coughlin. Didn't see them in a lot of didn't see them at all in the defensive side of the ball. We also, by the way, didn't see hardly any 11 snaps for Micah McFadden. Like, how surprised are you that they didn't throw him into the mix there after they released Blake Martinez? They go with Tay Crowder. He had a really strong game, as we highlighted yesterday. And you rely on the veteran in Calitro, which seemingly does feel like the one-to-one decision the Giants made here of like, we're moving on from Blake Martinez. He's hurt. He's whatever, disgruntled, blah, 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 done. And we just have this other veteran linebacker and we're going to throw him in there. And he had an okay game.
Yeah. I mean, listen, it was tough because to your point, I was thinking to myself, they're going to have to stack the box with big bodies against Derrick Henry. You can't go
Didn't use a lot of
soft.
Quincy Roche.
Right. And it didn't use him at all. I mean, obviously, he was being
Yeah,
promoted from the practice squad.
yeah, 4
Just
snaps. Yeah.
just keep in mind that Micah McFadden is 10 pounds less than Austin Calitro, right? Like 10
Yeah.
pounds matters when you're putting big bodies on the inside. Like they went with the larger lineup. Dexter Lawrence is a larger framed body, but like Justin Ellis is a big guy. Leonard Williams is a big guy. Jaheed Ward was all over the place, as you mentioned. They had to go a certain way, especially because they knew that the Tennessee Titans weren't going to do things left to right or around the line of scrimmage and get to the
Sure.
outside. They were really up the middle. There was not many exotic looks that the Giants were getting thrown at them. But with a guy like Christian McCaffrey, a guy like DJ Moore, they have playmakers that can make plays out in space. I would expect to see a different type of lineup for Wink and the Giants defense, especially if we can get a boost and get one of our edge rushers back.
Yeah, and then the other piece I think too, when we talk about shifts from week 1 to week 2 on the defensive side, 100% of the reps for Xavier McKinney, you would anticipate that 20, just 13 snaps for Tony Jefferson. He did get in the mix. Would expect that number to slowly increase for him because when you look inside the secondary overall, Darnay Holmes, who had a difficult one, still pulled 40 reps in this. Again, situationally, what type of sets are the Tennessee Titans running there? They don't have all these exotic weapons to use for you and really spread you out really thin. But he had a number of penalties in that game, only played 60% of the reps. I want to see him bounce back so badly in this week number 2 because he had such a good camp. Otherwise, I think you start to rely on 100% of the reps. Julian Love was out there like full time, right? So when you have your safeties out there full time, plus Tony Jefferson in the wings, plus we know we have the rookie coming back here down the pike, Dame Belton, Darnay Holmes got to have a nice little bounce back game for himself.
Adam, at the end of the day, my friend,
Sure,
we can't just rest on our laurels and think about week 1 for the rest of time. It was a nice win.
we
It was
could.
we could.
Be good.
We could. It was a field goal make away from the Giants being 0-1 instead of 1-0. Let's not labor the point. Let's be excited about being 1-0. But now that it's Wednesday, this is what we do on our Wednesday show. It's time to turn the page and look forward to the Carolina Panthers. If you look at this upcoming schedule with Dak Prescott getting hurt, with Carolina looking to struggle, with Justin Fields and the Bears still.
I like with Carolina looking to struggle. They're looking to.
Well, no, I mean, Baker Mayfield was
yeah.
already struggling to begin with, and he continued his struggles just in a different jersey. But with these upcoming games against Carolina, against Dallas without Dak, against Chicago, now that you see that the Giants can compete with a team like Tennessee, these become realistic opportunities for the team to go out and win. It's not anymore about hoping that the team can compete and win. Now, the Giants are favored going into this game against Carolina. It's a drastically different place than what we're accustomed to. But the fact of the matter is they played well enough now to be favored going into a lot of these games moving forward.
Yeah. As we do turn the page, we'll talk about the offensive side of the ball. Carolina provides some very tasty opportunities for the Giants to have success on that side. I think the one thing that I'll add in here when we talk about what happened around the league, remember the Cincinnati Bengals lost, right? The Tennessee Titans lost to the New York Football Giants. The Denver Broncos lost. The Raiders lost. Dallas Cowboys, obviously, with their injury, but the Green Bay Packers lost, right? There's some teams on this list. The LA Rams lost, right? That you don't expect to necessarily have bad seasons, but they come out of a bad week 1. And there was a lot of things in this first week of games that you said, whoa, a lot of fluky stuff going on here, right? To create some of these opportunities. And that's where we do. At the end of the day, I want to come into this second game, show me that this was not a fluke, that there are repeatable tenets of what you did against Tennessee, and that you can continue to be dynamic to create different looks. Because the one thing we have to watch for now is don't get complacent. Don't think that you can just do the 21 passes for Daniel Jones, 188 yards, and Saquon Barkley will do 200. We'll call it a day. Thanks so much, friends, right? Like the next step has to happen here. So we'll talk about that offensive side of the ball tomorrow. I think that's the most important thing that needs to be discussed for the success in the short term for the New York Football Giants. We'll break that down, not only on YouTube, where you can subscribe and like and share with your friends and family. You can get in the comments and tell me what a horrible human being I am. You can also get the podcast on the feed wherever you get those needs fulfilled. And as Andy Makowitz would want, need, and nay, demand the people know.
As always, let's go Big Blue.